I wanted to play a game with you guys. Just 2 or 3 questions. As she said, the main goal of the nonprofit that I focus on, we'll talk about that a little bit later, is frogs and toads and invertebrates. We build habitat for them in backyards, and we do a lot of other things. But you wouldn't believe how many people have already signed up for these habitats, and a lot of businesses have kind of stepped up where the grants haven't quite wanted to cover this stuff. But this has been huge for the younger generations, teaching them backyard conservation and environmental stewardship. So by the time they get to your age, they already have experience, whether maybe we allowed them to raise tadpoles in the classroom or see what a carnivorous plant was, and then they have the chance to like grow stuff in their backyard and see it. By the time they get to your age, they might already know what they want to be or what they want to do. And that's pretty much the goal of doing this with the citizen science and the outreach aspect of it. But again, this is another thing that we could always use more hands involved. There's a lot of work that has to be done. We put one in Bedford County, and we got to go back there and make some changes. But we're also going to be working on Stackhouse Park. If you guys are familiar with some of the county parks around here, their goal is to bring frogs back to Stackhouse. The green frog is already at Stackhouse, so we'll see how that goes. But they want to build the pond back, and we're going to work with them to do that. We already built a pollinator habitat in Brownstown out there. But I would say road mortality is by far the worst, because you could have 5 female American toads in one population. They come to breed, they lay their eggs, and then one night they're crossing the road to get back, and they all get hit. And now there's no more females, and if their eggs dry up or if they die, if the green frogs eat them and no more females come out, there is no more female American toads that are going to be in that population until others find them or take their place, which it's very dangerous. So suburbia and urban areas are very dangerous for frogs and toads. It doesn't mean they can't live there, but it's very hard for them to be sustained if we don't have backyard habitats. So what I've tried to do is, instead of going to like the county parks and the state forests and things that are already conserved, why don't we try to encourage people with their backyards to open them back up to the animals? And we've had a really good response with that. It just takes a little bit of funding, a little bit of money to get that to happen, but we've had a lot of positive success with it. And we have actually seen the wood frogs come into suburban neighborhoods for 3 years now. I have trail cameras, and I actually have a weather camera on my weather station. It's a time lapse, but it's kind of funny because I can capture frogs and toads coming in, and we've caught them reproducing for the last 3 years on the cameras. So that's something that we're going to integrate into our weather stations and habitats. But what you're looking at here is also what I was just talking about. So I have a main picture here. This is a toad that got wrist surgery a year ago, about on October 20th. So your husband loves this story because I was in his class explaining this to him, and he couldn't stop laughing. But so I also ironically do happen to keep frogs and toads. Of course I do, right? Because I'm just that into it. But I also do a lot of road rescues, and I keep frogs and toads. I have state permits to be able to keep certain frogs and toads, and yes, you actually need a fishing license or a state permit to be able to keep native species. So I have that. I was designing a tank that's probably much bigger than this, probably a table and a half for how big it is, to give you perspective. It's 242 gallons, and it's like 350 pounds empty. It was fun getting it up the steps, but I was trying to create the most elaborate American toad and wood frog habitat that I could possibly create. And it was at the same time that I found this toad. So imagine this, somebody who is really experienced, really immersed in caring about these animals in the wild, who's building one of the biggest, most advanced habitats for these animals, finds a toad who has its wrist broken in the middle of a busy hillside. I not only took him to get his wrist operated on, he had those rods put in 3 places in his wrist, but then he has the opportunity now to live in possibly one of the most advanced American toad habitats. So it's even crazier than a feel-good story, because it was literally right place, right time, right person to get him the treatment and everything. Because I don't know how many people here pay $2,500 to do a wrist surgery on a toad out of pocket, but I did, and he's alive. He's really fun. He just woke up from sleeping for 3 months. I didn't know what happened to him, but yeah. So I was gonna bring him today, but I didn't have enough time. But anyway, You could see him up top too. That was when he was in quarantine. The blue, that was him right after surgery when they put him to sleep to put that in, and then he was just kind of unhappy. He looks much better, much healthier right now. You can see in the top left here, the next three pictures though, there was a toad who got hit or something happened to its lower jaw. I remember I was very concerned for that toad, but we were able to bring it back to the wild. Wildlife Works in Westmoreland County took it in, and they were working with it to make sure that it was healthy enough. You could see that the pickerel frog was just decapitated from getting hit by a car. And then the middle toad, I don't know if it got hit by a lawnmower, but it's pretty rough what happens to some American toads in suburban neighborhoods, because we watched this toad coming towards us, and it was like a horror story, because then the flies, it was the middle of the summer, they were dumping their eggs. It looked like rice was on the toad. That toad had to actually be put down because it had too many internal injuries. Yes, I actually got it x-rayed and stuff like that. I have a lot of agreements with wildlife rehabilitation centers around Pennsylvania. I'm like the middleman, so if I find them, I can take them somewhere, and somebody else treats them usually. Some of them I've paid out of pocket for, but it's very difficult. But the goal is to try to get them back in the wild, or to get them to a place where they could be an ambassador animal. So I don't really ask for help doing this because it's dangerous. I could get killed, as well as like you watch the animals that you're trying to save get run over every night. So, or you see really bad images of them. So it's very challenging. This is a little bit of what I was talking about earlier. You can see the millipede there. This is one other creature. Like I said, we focus on amphibians and invertebrates, as well as carnivorous plants. But this is a big project that we're undertaking, and it's going to start this year with the millipedes that we're going to get donated from a place called Josh's Frogs. They're captive bred, but this is the same species that lives in Pennsylvania that you'll see on the bike trails that always gets hit. And we're going to also have native plants, native carnivorous plants that children will be able to raise. They'll have the opportunity to take care of it for 8 to 10 weeks, and then we'll kind of switch it up. We're trying to get to about 10 schools. The main goal isn't necessarily for this, it's for the next part, which is the Tadpoles to Toads initiative, or Tadpoles to Tree Frogs, depending on who we have. But this is a main thing that we started last year, and we had a lot of success. So we had about, I'd say maybe 15 to 25 baby toads go back to the wild. The main thing is gray tree frogs and American toads lay their eggs in puddles. Those puddles, of course, dry up because it's super hot now, and it's even drier than it's been before. So instead of letting them just dry out and get wiped out, we're able to get the tadpoles, bring them to classrooms with the teachers that have a fishing license, so that way we can bring in the 15 tadpoles that they're allowed to have. And then the kids can raise them. You can see the picture of me there. That was at, I think it was in Berlin, in Somerset County. But the opportunity is there for the children to raise them, and then for them to go back. They're in the most vulnerable state as tadpoles. You can't get out of the water. Everything is bigger than you. It wants to eat you. And the puddles that you're in are going to dry up. They're probably like this deep at the most. So it's very dangerous, and it's getting a little bit more difficult for them in certain areas. We want to get to 10 schools, so that way I could get a different specialized permit from the Fish and Boat Commission. And this is another thing that I do along with the nonprofit. It's a little separate. Some of the ambassador animals that I spoke about earlier, and I kind of came up with parts of this while I was sitting in her class. I'd ask you a lot of questions, and I went and saw Dr. Bonachea, and he had also set me up with some cool ideas and kind of helped me to get on my way. But I also run a multimedia brand. We focus on multiple shows. Of course, you could read a little bit there with hiking and a podcast. I've talked to people that are in zoos. I've talked to people that head of like really big foundations. We've had some really cool people come on and talk about various topics. And then there's, of course, the very large enclosure that I was talking about. And you kind of see there some of the setups, the camera I have with me today. But I give you a perspective of who's with me in Woods and Forests Media and what we're doing. You can see the background knowledge that you need if you're interested in wanting to participate with any of the shows. You don't have to know all that stuff, but there's a lot there that you'd have to be a little bit versed with to be able to accomplish this stuff. I already have the educator permit, and if you wanted to fly a drone, we have a few guys who have their license, the Part 107. But anyway, so this is a lot of the stuff that I'm doing.
Thank you, guys. my Friday crew, the 5 Point Fridays.